Welcome to Quantum RX, the podcast that teaches you how to move beyond stuck emotions and trauma for mind, body, and spirit healing. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. So I always strive for honesty, transparency, and authenticity with my audience. And each week, what I give you is a reflection of where I'm at on my journey, observations of what's going on, collectively in society, or even relatable stories that I can share that teaches us something. So in complete honesty, transparency, and authenticity, I wanted to share with you that in the past little bit, I have been in a funk, feeling irritable, misaligned, and just not myself, not showing up with that kind of same energy and enthusiasm for life that I typically have. Today's a good day. That's why I decided to record the podcast today, because I was feeling it. I was feeling good. And so, I was like, let's record the podcast and let's get some truth bombs out there, because I am typically a largely very positive, optimistic, also realistic. I think that's a good caveat, because I know some people are positive, optimistic with rose-colored glasses. I am positive and optimistic, but also very realistic about expectations and the reality of the way things are. So I always feel like I've had, just a good balance in general, except for I notice it when I'm going through these transition periods. And I would say they're transition periods and often times when I need to learn lots of lessons rapidly, or periods of rapid growth. I know this always happens. And a lot of people that I work with have started realizing and becoming aware of these periods too. And also, among all of my friends and colleagues that are in this space too, they all say this. We're all like, I'm feeling it now. I know that, something's coming and it's going to be great once it happens. But I feel really crappy right now. And truthfully, that's how I've been feeling, for the last 3 to 4 months. And I know I will be fine on the other side because of that inner knowing and that trust in the divine. But when you're in this space, it isn't always easy to be thinking about that or feeling that. I mean, honestly, I have days where sometimes I'm just like, oh, like it just feels so hard. And I said to a friend the other day, it almost feels like there's like this big cloud that's been hanging over me, but kind of like on me and in me too. And over the past several months, it's definitely shrunk, but it's still there. There's still a piece of it that's there, because you've heard it. You've heard it on the podcast. I've talked about shadow work. I've talked about responsibility and accountability and stepping up and being having good self-leadership. That's all been a byproduct of this moment, this funk that I'm going through. So I want to be honest and share all of those realities with you. And so often people, they show the highlights of the healing journey and, your growth journey online, but it is not all rainbows and unicorns. It can be downright ugly, frustrating, confusing, and even defeating at times. Even for folks who've done a lot of inner work and theoretically, quote unquote, know what to expect. So why does this happen? That's what we're going to be getting into today. And we are going to cover how to be able to see what needs to be seen, how to shift mindset and get through the weeds, and why you need a team to support you through these times. If you're curious as to if you have any stored emotions or trauma that might be causing your illness, preventing you from achieving your goals, or even just showing up as the best, most authentic version of yourself, I invite you to take my free Stored Emotions and Trauma quiz, and you will find that link in the show notes. So let's get into it. Let's get into the, like I said before, the ugly, frustrating, confusing, and even defeating moments. So like I said, for those of you who've been listening, probably in the realm of it was around July, I started doing work with a friend, because I knew I had some stuff that was, I want to say, more like generational and ancestral, that needed to be dealt with. And I had done a lot of the work myself, but I wanted somebody else's kind of take on it. And not only their take on it, their lens, but also their help, support, guidance, their point of view, because I know that I view the world through one lens that's based on my trauma, my experiences, my growth, my knowledge, the cumulative everything that is me in this current state, right? This current state of being, this current version of who I am. And so I always like to get other people to kind of check that reality, is what I'm seeing the, quote unquote truth, because truth, we can get into that another day. Truth is an interesting word. Everyone has their own version of truth, right? So I do that. And so I started working with a friend of mine, and it kind of opened like a big can of worms, or Pandora's box. And it led to many things that I hadn't expected. I knew about all of the generational trauma that I had in my family, and I had done some work on it myself, right? And I want to say when I had done the previous work, it was more like piecemeal. It was like addressing something here, addressing something there. And cumulatively over time, it resulted in some great, I released so much, I transformed a lot, I integrated all the things that need to be integrated, and I was feeling really, really good. But I want to say about a year ago, towards the end of 2024, there were little seeds that were being planted, and it was telling me that it was, kind of time to address I would say, big collective sphere of some of like the ancestral and generational trauma. And so I don't ever push these processes. I let it unfold, and, kind of, I found somebody who that I thought would be a great person to work with. And we actually, in that process, like before I even started working with her, we kind of became friends, and then we become good friends throughout the process. But it was fascinating to me because I truthfully had no idea, no clue what it was going to open up inside me, the layers and the depth, because I thought I had already gone there. It's like, no. The God, the universe, the divine will always tell you, nope, just when you think you've gone there, you haven't. We're going to give you another layer. And truthfully, this is not as dramatic as some of the, kind of periods of healing, grief, release, and growth that I've had in the past. This one is just, I want to say, for me, it was just more frustrating and confusing because this is the first time, and there were moments that came up that I was really like, why? I don't understand why this is happening. And that, especially if you've done a lot of inner growth, you've got to surrender to that. But I was in a space a couple months ago where I wasn't ready to surrender. I was trying my hardest to figure out what that why was, or what the many whys were. That doesn't work. So first thing I wanted to cover with you is how to be able to see what needs to be seen, because we get into these moments in order for a lesson or a gift to be shown, or we could also say many lessons. And because I feel like this past several months has been multiple lessons for me, like real big reality checks. And so I'm going to share some of that with you too. But first, it's like, how do you see what needs to be seen? I would say starting off with reflection and curiosity with the point of view of grace and surrender. Because like I said, I was trying to push, my reflection was journaling or doing some of the like I do regressions with people, and I was doing all of that, and I'm like, what can I get, what can I learn, what am I supposed to learn? And I was pushing, and then I remembered after probably several weeks, at least 3 or 4 weeks of doing that, I remembered that I needed to surrender to the process and just let it unfold. And instead of having that energy of pushing, I needed to have that energy of, I'm curious, divine, please show me what I need to see. I am aware, and I'm allowing this space for this to come into me. Instead of, I used to be a past ruminator. I'm not a ruminator anymore, but I found myself ruminating on some of this stuff. So I was like, that was my first clue that I was kind of falling into past patterns, but also was not in the surrender and grace space. And so I got curious, right? I'm like, what can I learn from this? What do I need to see, right? What do I need to see? Why are certain patterns repeating? If you notice that something keeps coming up in your life over and over again, and it might not look the same. Sometimes I've had that where like that same exact thing keeps on coming over, coming up in my life, like beating you over the head, with a frying pan. That, or I've also had it happen where it's like the same theme, but it, comes about in different ways, different manifestations. So there's that piece too. Like, are there patterns that are repeating? It's anything that you need to be aware of that you are not seeing, because that's what these, once you've done you have a good foundation and base of like I said, that grief, dealing with your grief, releasing the trauma, stuck emotions, changing your mindset and your beliefs, all of that stuff. This tends to be what happens. These aren't as hard emotionally. Like I wasn't sitting in the bathtub crying for, hours on end, but I was sitting with all this and holding it. And sometimes that can be harder because you're holding it in this space of like, there's a lot of emotion that comes into that space. There's a space of a little bit of anxiousness because you're holding it and you don't really know what to do with it. So you're like, oh, okay, what do I do with this? And you're having those moments of surrender. And I notice that when I surrender the most, I get the answers I need quicker. And so surrender has been on my mind a lot in the last 2 months, like a lot. Because I keep on finding, like when I push the surrender, I know I need to surrender more and trust more and have more faith. And like I said before, it's kind of hard sometimes and even defeating when you sit there and you're like, I'm doing that thing, but not, nothing's happening. Like, I feel like I'm stuck. I'm not moving forward. That's because there's something inside you. In this case, it was inside me that wasn't aligned, probably sometimes truths that you're not seeing or acknowledging. You are energetically, that's what I felt like. I feel like my energetic baseline is typically pretty high, but I've felt like my energetic baseline is low. And when I go out in public, I've been more susceptible to other people's energy. And I'm like, this is not good. I need to get back to, who I am and this baseline, because it like truthfully just did not feel good at all. Like I didn't like how I was feeling. I was very like generally irritable, and that is not normal for me. I just tell people, aside from dealing with the perimenopausal hormone situation, that in that space I was irritable, but that was obviously another cause too, right? And it also coincided with a lot of some pretty profound healing that I was doing at the moment too. So that was a whole lot of stuff happening at that moment. But now it was just like, I'm irritable. I was more sensitive to a lot of things, sensitive to things that other people say, things that other people were doing, the collective everything that's been going on recently. And it's been a lot. I was just more sensitive to all of that. And I didn't like it. I felt like, I said to somebody, I was like, I felt like a pincushion that was being pricked all the time. And I was just like, what gives? Like, why is this happening? And so I turned that, kind of, that mindset around. And that brings us to that second piece, like how shifting your mindset gets you through the weeds and these tough moments. And I don't want to say I'm embarrassed to say this, but like I found myself at moments almost having a victim mentality again, when I haven't felt that way in years, like over a decade. I shouldn't say that. Probably a decade, yes. But like even in I'd say maybe 7-8 years ago, I probably had some moments of feeling like, why is this happening to me? Blah, 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 that type of stuff. But very much beyond that, like I know that things are happening, for me and not to me. But I found myself for the first time in like years, like in that space of, that, things are happening to me. And I went back. It was interesting because doing some of the work that I do with other people that I was doing to myself, I found myself revisiting wounds that I had healed before and felt really, really good about. But it was interesting because it wasn't just one, it was a bunch of them. And they represent, I realized after taking that step back and changing my mindset and saying, you know, how is this happening for me and not to me? And being honest about fear, that was what came out of this. There were some fears, right? And one of my big things that I had to deal with several years ago was like the idea of not being good enough, which that was like for me a shock. I was like, I've never felt like this, but obviously deep down internally, there's a piece of me that does, and that circled back into all of this. And it was a fear of not being good enough. It wasn't just I'm not good enough, but it was that fear of being not good enough. And so I think I probably, I'd say in the ballpark of maybe 3 months ago or so, 3, 4 months ago, I did a podcast and I was talking about fear. And I'm like, at that moment in time, I literally felt I was feeling like invincible. I did not have fear about anything. I felt like I could conquer the world. But here I am, we'll say 4 months later, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, again, that's what fear feels like because I'm having it right now. And it's like, and that's why I said I want to be like authentic and honest and transparent with you because we are fluid beings. Our existence is fluid. We are not stagnant. We don't come in one form and stay that way. And I want you to know this. I want you to understand that, yes, we have some great, amazing times. Like I said, when I was feeling like invincible and like, I really feel like I'm not afraid of anything because I had such strong alignment and faith and inner knowing and trust in the divine and the process of life. And then all this happened. And here I am, like I said. And so it was fascinating to me to go through, go through that moment. And truthfully, it's been very humbling. That's a word that I've been telling people a lot in the last couple of days is so incredibly humbling because like I said, all of those things, like those wounds that I had healed, some traumas that I had dealt with, they came up and a lot of it was, I mean, the lessons that I got, remember I said it was multiple things, but all of the same theme, because that's what I allowed myself to see. What was the theme? The themes were not feeling seen, not feeling heard, not feeling valued or respected. And I knew that was underlying some fears that I had. And I talked about this at the end of last year and probably the beginning of this year about really stepping into my authentic self and my authentic truth in the eyes of a lot of my professional peers. Because like I said, they'd always seen me as very, like, I was a researcher, very scientifically based. I think a lot of them always knew that I was kind of very like open. I have never discounted anything somebody has told me, that they'll be like, oh, you're going to think this is crazy or this is woo. And I'll be like, no, if it works for you, that's all that matters. Right. And so it was fascinating because I was at this point where I was like, why is this happening now? And it was like, I think I had dealt with like the professional level of fear, but then I was dealing with, I think, the personal level of being seen and feeling like I was being my authentic self among, like, personally, it would be like family, a lot of my, I shouldn't say a lot, all of my friends, all of my good friends, and I would say even down to acquaintances for the most part, know who I am and know who I'm about. I will give kind of like the caveat. There are some circles of people that I have to deal with periodically, depending upon the time of the year and what's going on, that I don't think they fully know and get to see who I am just because we don't have those conversations and things are kind of kept onto certain topics and at like, I don't want to say superficial levels because we definitely have some deep conversations, but it's not about that stuff. Like we talk about things that are a lot of times we're talking about kids or family life or work related stuff. We're not talking about like deep things like who we are, what our, belief systems are, kind of what makes us tick. And I will say this also, even in some of those groups, I don't feel like, I don't know if it would be safe among the entire group. And that's not me saying like, I have said some things like in those groups that, kind of point people to like where I'm at and what I do. But just because, you want to be in a safe space when you are, being vulnerable and showing who you are. But I like basically got to the point where I was just like, this is the outcome of all of this, heaviness and all the crap I've gone through. Again, finally gotten to the point of I don't care. I had to feel this, work through it, and then integrate it. So last year and beginning of this year, it was like dealing with the professional aspect of identity. And this year it was dealing with the personal aspect of identity. And that's hard, right? Because professionally, I feel like I can have a really thick skin. But personally, especially when people know, love, respect, say things to you, that can hurt a little bit more. I will say I'm much, much better at handling those situations. And I usually say, like, that's on you. That is you and your point of view. It's not on me, and it doesn't affect me. And truthfully, it's led to some pretty cool and productive conversations. But sometimes you have to agree to disagree. And I'm okay with that. But sometimes other people that I'm, talking to aren't. So, it's a vulnerable space that I was not aware that was a thing, right? And again, it's like seeing what needs to be seen. I wasn't aware, but now I am. And so that helps me grow as a person. And another piece of the puzzle, and I think I touched on this, but it's approaching this experience with love and grace. And that is hard. It is hard. Like I said, it's like everything can be frustrating and confusing, and you can even feel defeated. But I catch myself when I'm feeling like that. And I try to open up that, kind of chest space, that heart space of love and grace. And really, I mean, like I said, like there were some of those traumas that had come up, and that's what I had to do. I'm like, why are these emotions coming up? And truthfully, it was almost like I had to have some experiences in a moment, and I had so much pent up frustration, and I felt like it had to be released. And I was just like verbally vomiting. And that is another thing. Like I have not done that in probably close to a decade again. All of that type of, like when I would have traumas, I would sit there and cycle and ruminate and just have to dump it all out. And I found myself, again, this was last week, doing that a little bit. And after the fact, and after I actually had the kind of experiences and encounters that I needed to have, I came back to that place where I was just like, I was thinking like, how silly you were to like, have to go back to that. But apparently I had to happen. I had to do that. It had to happen for me. And truthfully, I don't know exactly why, but and maybe it was humbling, right? Humbling and humility and having grace, not only with myself, but with other people and expectations. That was one of the things that I actually got from it, because as you know, I've talked about like, when my mom and dad came and having good experiences with them and really seeing them as people and not with all of the, responsibility and all of the heaviness and all of the things that go with being labeled as a parent, right? I saw them as people and saw them for who they were. That same idea happened in this situation too, where I felt like I was seeing people for who they are and not putting expectations on them and things of that nature too. And it ended up being good. But like I said, I kind of felt silly, and I was like, you know that lesson and you lived that lesson, but why did this need to happen? And I think a lot of it was like, again, that like that humility and that grace, and just realizing that we are all humans and we are all on this human journey together. And even though there's a lot of heaviness and crap going on in the world, we can still connect to each other, with love, with grace, with curiosity, all of that stuff. And that was the bigger why I've been struggling, is because just what's happening. I think a lot of that is like during election years. I've always been sensitive to that period of time. And I know that was part of like, it kind of came to a crescendo last week when everyone was voting and all of that was going on. Because truthfully, I'll just say it. I think that politics brings out the absolute worst in people. I don't think that it brings out positive. There's a very select few people who can put their emotions aside to have respectful, rational, productive, conducive conversations. A lot of people get way too emotionally involved. And when things get like that, they go sideways. And this is something that, with, religion, economics, politics, that tends to like emotionally affect me. It literally makes me sad why people can't just meet each other with, love and respect. And so that has always gotten to me. And I know that was a piece of the puzzle too, but a lot of it, just all of the things that have happened in the past couple of months, plus that, and things going on in the rest of the world. I know that even though I do a lot of like just energetic practices and just mindfulness of not letting all of that in and affecting, I should say, affecting me, it was. And I was frustrated by that. I was frustrated. And I honestly think it was happening for a purpose. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't happening to me. It was happening for me and the, illuminating lessons I needed to learn. And so, yeah, it has been a very challenging past, kind of 3 to 4 months, especially when I had like the start to my year was amazing. Like January through May I felt unstoppable and like I was on fire. And then June came and it was like some things started happening, and then July and then it all unfolded from there. But I knew it was going to happen. So that was an interesting piece of the puzzle. And that brings us to point number 3. You need a team to support you through these times. And so, like I said, if I know when I need somebody else to help me work through things. And so I reached out to that one friend, and she and I did a lot of work together. And then I had a couple of other friends that unfortunately don't live locally. So I can't really we connect on Zoom and we'll send each other voice notes all the time. But yeah, they also kind of helped me through this time. I do have one friend here locally that she and I connect, and she's been very helpful, especially dealing with things kind of on the local level, because living where I live, things tend to be magnified, all of this divisiveness and the kind of the energies that are happening now are more magnified, which is why I feel like I was feeling it tremendously. And so, yeah, and there were a lot of like experiences that kind of happened throughout this year that kind of compounded what was happening too. And the experiences that were here that were local too, that I was just like, oh my gosh, how much can we take, without, things changing. And so I always tell myself, like, I want to be a component and a facilitator of the change, the positive change, and bringing people back together. And so I knew I needed to get myself back really, truly into that space. And that friend that's local, she has helped facilitate that for me. And then I also have another friend who is in the healing space, and he has kind of been like the last leg of the journey for me. Just talking through some things with him and, talking to other people that I would call myself a very sensitive person. And I always have been, talking to those people and knowing that a lot of people have been feeling this way too, especially in the last 3 to 4 months. So I felt better. In that moment, like being like, hey, I'm not the only one. A lot of other people are feeling like this. So that it's just important. You need to have your team, and your team can be whoever you want it to be. Like I know I've got people in the kind of like the healing space, the spiritual spaces. I've got some people in my immediate community that I can talk to and relate to. I've got other friends outside of that and family that I can, talk to about some, this stuff too. And then I also have, I have people that I work with, like other people who I pay to help me work through some of this stuff too, because I know I can't do it all on my own. And sometimes I need their energy to hold this space for me, or I need their point of view or their, kind of cumulative knowledge and knowing to be able to shine some light on things for me. And there's no shame in that. I have always been the kind of person to do it on my own, right? I haven't wanted to rely on other people because I knew if I did it myself, I would get it done. And I knew I could rely on myself, where in the past when I have relied on people, sometimes they have, kind of like failed me and not shown up. And that hurts, right? That kind of sucks. But at some point you have to have more vulnerability and trust in the process and ask for help when you need it. And I'd say in the past, probably 3 or 4 years, I've been I should say better about asking for help. I had seen a friend post online about this the other day, and I realized that I wasn't asking for help as much as I needed to. And so I made a conscious effort again to, get into that space of asking for help or support. Sometimes asking for help looks different ways. Sometimes it's like, hey, can you listen to me? Listen to me and reflect things back to me. Sometimes you just need somebody to listen, and sometimes you just need a hug. And sometimes you need somebody to help you out, right? You need somebody to help you out with responsibilities you have, or, picking up your kids from school or getting them to and from, an activity or you just, be like, sometimes asking for help is saying no too. Like if you're supposed to be hosting an event during the holidays and you just don't have the energy or bandwidth to deal with it right now, sometimes asking somebody else to host is asking for help and, really honoring yourself in your process. So there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that at all. And I think that we live in a space where sometimes there is shame correlated to that. And so I want you to know that there's no shame in it. And the more you do it and the more you ask for help, the more comfortable you will get with it. And sometimes you just have to remind yourself, just like I did. I definitely had to remind myself that, yes, it's okay. And you need to ask for help sometimes because we get caught up in the monotony of daily life. And I can say now I am coming out of that space. Like I said, my giant, I felt like was my giant big black gray cloud, what that was hanging over me is now like a little one. There's a little something there. But I know I'm at the end. I know I am nearing the end, and hopefully I'll have some other, illuminations and ideas and insights that have come from this, and I will share them with you then when they come to me. But I really wanted you to see that, this is the reality of it. Yeah. 4 or 5 months ago, I was, doing great and on cloud nine. And now I'm literally, I'm at the end of it, but I was in a dark cloud and in a darker space than I normally am. And what I want to tell you is like, it was hard. Like I had some weeks where I was just feeling like all of the things, like the irritability, the frustration, the low energy. That was like weeks on end at the beginning of this. And then as I dealt with things, like I would have days, I would have a couple of days where I felt good. And then would have a couple of days when I was back in the funk. And that's kind of been the good days are finally starting to outnumber the, I don't want to call them bad days, but like the days where I'm feeling like lower energy and just meh. Those are, fewer and far between. I think last week was a ramp up for me because it was when, the politics and everyone voting and all of the things, right? And I just saw some ugliness being hurled online again. And I feel like, we all have some PTSD after what we've been through in the past decade or so of elections of different kinds. So yeah, just honor yourself, honor the process, and know that, like I said before, healing is not all rainbows and unicorns. Self-growth is not all rainbows and unicorns. You are going to have these moments of And if you're open to and willing to, even when things are getting tough, remember to have an open heart and give yourself grace and reflect and see things with curiosity. There is so much goodness that can come from that. And as always, sending you guys so much love until next time.
If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness, and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.